Before we jump into this unbelievable true story, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell notification because every week we drop real-life drama that'll keep you on the edge of your seat. Trust me, you do not want to miss what goes down in this episode. The courtroom was dead silent when the judge looked up from the papers in front of him and said, "I have reviewed the HOA's bylaws and the plaintiff's medical documentation. And I must say, I'm deeply disturbed." I sat beside my 9-year-old son, Noah, gripping his tiny hand in mine. Max, his golden retriever service dog, sat obediently at his feet. He wore his red vest like a soldier on duty, sensing the tension in the room. I glanced across the aisle at the HOA board members, all 5 of them sitting stiff as statues. Their lawyer had just wiped sweat from his forehead. I knew then something had cracked. The judge continued, "This isn't just about a dog. It's about discrimination. It's about power abused." Gasps echoed across the courtroom. Some reporters scribbled frantically. One of the board members, Mrs. Henley, the one who always wore too much perfume, visibly blanched. And just as the judge was about to deliver the final decision, someone in the back stood up and shouted, "Tell them what you did to the cameras." The whole room turned. But before I tell you what happened in that courtroom, let me take you back to where this all began. Before the lawsuit, before the votes, before Max even became part of our family. Back to when kindness still existed on our street. Back to when I thought people were better than this. We moved to Willow Ridge in the spring. The kind of neighborhood with neat lawns, pastel-colored mailboxes, and a monthly newsletter called the Willow Whisper. The HOA was proud of that newsletter. They were proud of everything, actually. The flowers in the roundabout. The flag that flew over the community pool. The strict color codes for holiday decorations. Rules weren't just enforced, they were gospel. Noah had always been a sweet kid. Bright smile, big eyes, but the world overwhelmed him. Loud noises, unfamiliar faces, even certain smells could set him off. Doctors said it was sensory processing disorder with severe anxiety. When he started refusing to leave the house, his therapist suggested a service dog. That's when Max came into our lives. Max wasn't just a dog. He was Noah's anchor. When Noah would shake and cry during thunderstorms, Max would lie beside him, pressing his body gently against Noah's to calm him. When Noah had to go into new places, Max would lead the way. He even helped Noah start speaking in public again. It was magic watching them together. At first, everyone seemed fine with Max. Neighbors would wave at us. Kids wanted to pet him, though we had to explain he was working. Mrs. Jenkins down the street even brought over homemade dog treats. But then came the letter, folded neatly, slipped into our mailbox. No return address. "Dear resident, your pet violates HOA regulations. No dogs over 20 pounds are allowed in Willow Ridge. You are required to remove the animal within 14 days to avoid fines." I reread it 5 times. It wasn't signed. No official seal. Just a printed letter on plain white paper. I thought maybe it was a mistake. So I did what any reasonable person would. I called the HOA office. That's when I met Denise. Denise was the HOA secretary, though she acted like she was the Queen of England. She didn't even let me explain. "Ma'am, rules are rules," she said. "If you wanted exceptions, you should have moved somewhere else." "But he's a service dog," I said. "He's registered. My son has a legal right." She actually scoffed. "You'll need to present that to the board. Next meeting's in 2 weeks. I hung up stunned. Those 2 weeks were awful. Every day I waited, wondering if I'd get another letter. Noah sensed it too. He stopped sleeping. Max started whining at night. Something in the air had changed. The night of the HOA meeting, I brought everything. Medical records, Max's certification, a letter from Noah's therapist. I dressed up, tried to look composed. Noah stayed home with his aunt. The board sat behind a long table like royalty. 5 of them, all older, all smug. Denise was there too, taking notes like it was the State of the Union. I presented our case, told them what Max did for Noah, showed them the documents. They didn't even look. "While we understand your concerns," said Mr. Rayburn, the board president, "our community has long-standing rules. No dogs over 20 pounds. No exceptions. It would set a precedent." I blinked. "It's against the law to deny a service dog." He smiled like a crocodile. "Well, the board has the right to vote." They voted. Right then. 5 hands raised. Unanimous. Motion passed. The animal must be removed within 10 days or fines will apply. I stood there frozen. I could barely breathe. Felt like the floor opened under me. You can't do this, I whispered. But they already moved on to the next agenda item, pool umbrella colors for summer. I stormed out. Back home, Noah sat on the couch with Max curled beside him. Did they say Max can stay? He asked. I didn't answer. I locked myself in the bathroom and cried. That week was a blur. I called a lawyer. Filed complaints. Got nowhere. The HOA doubled down, said their bylaws predated any service animal policy and that our dog posed a potential threat to neighborhood peace. Then came the fines. First $50, then $150, then $500. They even tried to suspend our community privileges. No pool. No clubhouse. We were officially outcasts. But I wasn't done. I decided to fight. Not just for Noah, but for every family who's ever been told they don't belong. That's when I started gathering evidence, talking to neighbors, digging into the HOA's past. And that's when I found something. Something buried in the old HOA records. Something that made my hands shake when I read it. Something that would make everything unravel. But before I could act on it, someone spray painted the word liar across our garage door. The spray paint was bright red, the kind that dripped as it dried, like blood. Liar, it screamed across our white garage door, the letters jagged and angry. Noah saw it before I could stop him. He froze on the front steps, Max pressing into his side. His little fists clenched, his chest rising fast, and his eyes wide with panic. Mom, he whispered, his voice breaking. Did I lie? My heart shattered. I dropped to my knees in front of him. No, baby. You did nothing wrong. Nothing. He didn't cry, but his lip trembled. Max gently nudged his shoulder, grounding him. That morning, I didn't even call the police first, I called the news. I was done playing nice. I needed people to see what this neighborhood really was behind the fancy newsletters and manicured lawns. I needed people to know the truth. This wasn't about a dog. This was about cruelty. This was about small people playing God with other people's lives. The local news station sent a young reporter named Jenna who looked barely out of college, but she was sharp. When she saw the garage, her eyes widened. I told her everything from the moment we moved in to the secret vote to the fines. We stood in front of the camera, Noah clutching Max, and I told our story for the first time not as a plea, but as a stand. The next morning it aired, and everything exploded. Calls came pouring in. People from across the country offered help. Some shared similar stories, banned wheelchairs, denied ramps, fined for therapy gardens. Others just sent support. A few lawyers even offered to take the case for free. But in Willow Ridge, things got worse. The next day, a notice was taped to our front door. Due to public misrepresentation of the Willow Ridge community and violation of our HOA Code of Conduct, the Johnson family is hereby suspended from all neighborhood events and gatherings until further notice. Noah asked what that meant. I told him it just meant we wouldn't be going to the block party. He didn't seem to care. He was more worried about Max. Is Max gonna have to leave? He asked again that night. I looked him in the eye. Not a chance. Behind closed doors, my lawyer and I were preparing to file a federal discrimination lawsuit under the Fair Housing Act. But we needed more than the obvious. We needed a pattern. A motive. Something that would show the board's behavior wasn't just a bad decision, but malicious. That's when I started digging through the HOA's public filings. I asked around quietly, old residents, the HOA accountant, even the community landscaper. One night, I stayed up reading old scanned newsletters online, back when the HOA used to publish board decisions in full before switching to vague summaries. And there it was. A meeting note from 2017. Motion to remove dog belonging to Mr. Arlo Garcia due to community safety concern. Dog classified as emotional support animal. Board votes 4-1 in favor of removal. I remembered Mr. Garcia, an older veteran who walked with a cane and used to sit with his lab mix outside. He moved out suddenly, no goodbye. There was another case in 2019. A family with a son who had seizures. The parents had mentioned a seizure alert dog. They sold their house 6 months after getting the dog. Patterns. That's what we needed. I brought it all to my lawyer and he nodded. This is more than enforcement. This is targeted. But while we built our case, the HOA wasn't sitting idle. One night, I came home to find our backyard gate wide open. Max was gone. I screamed his name until my throat hurt. Noah was crying. We ran through the neighborhood with flashlights, shouting. An hour later, Max was found tied to a street lamp 4 blocks away. Shaking. Terrified. His vest was missing. We called the police. They wrote up a report but said unless there was footage, they couldn't prove anything. No arrests. No suspects. I knew who did it. I just couldn't prove it yet. The next day, I installed cameras. Every corner of our house was covered. I wasn't just protecting Max. I was protecting my son. From the very people who were supposed to be our neighbors. The final straw came a week later. Noah had a big breakthrough at therapy. He spoke up in group time for the first time in months. He even asked if he could take Max to the library. So we walked there together, Max proudly leading the way. When we returned, a new letter waited in our mailbox. Not from the HOA this time. From the law firm representing them. It was a cease and desist. They accused me of slander. Of damaging the community's reputation. Of creating a hostile environment through false accusations. And in the last paragraph, they issued an ultimatum. Failure to remove the animal from the property within 48 hours will result in legal escalation, including potential liens placed on your home. That night, I didn't sleep. I stood by Max's bed and watched Noah finally resting peacefully with Max's head across his legs. I watched the gentle rise and fall of my son's chest. I watched the dog who had saved him 100 times over. And I made my decision. I wasn't just going to fight them. I was going to expose everything. The next morning, I walked into the HOA office with a folder, and I asked to see the HOA financials. Denise laughed in my face. You're not on the board. I held up the state statute I'd printed out. I don't have to be. These are public records. And if you don't show me, I'll subpoena them. She paled. But she didn't say no. She said, fine. Come back tomorrow. I did. And what I found the next day in those records made my stomach turn. It wasn't just about Max. It wasn't just about Noah. It was about something far uglier than I imagined. And it was right there, hiding in plain sight on page 47. The financial records were printed in tight black font on recycled paper, held together with a rusty binder clip. I sat alone in the dusty conference room of the HOA building, flipping page after page while Denise pretended to organize folders nearby. But her eyes kept darting toward me, like she already knew what I was about to find. Page 47 wasn't labeled. Just a line item, community safety enhancements, $14,220. That sounded fine until I looked closer. It wasn't a one-time expense. That same vague line appeared every month for over a year. And the vendor listed? CR Solutions LLC. I'd never heard of them. There was no phone number, no website, no invoice breakdown. Just the same line over and over. Over $14,000 a month for safety in a neighborhood where the biggest crime was teens egging mailboxes on Halloween? I made copies of every page. Back at home, I Googled CR Solutions for 3 hours. Nothing. No listings, no reviews, no incorporation records. Until I dug deeper. Turns out CR Solutions was registered under the name of Curtis Rayburn. Yes, that Rayburn. The HOA president. The same man who led the vote to ban Max. The same man who claimed to be protecting the neighborhood from disruptions. He was paying his own company with HOA dues under a fake name. It hit me like a punch to the gut. They weren't just abusing their power, they were profiting off it. Keeping people like us out wasn't just about control. It was about money. The fewer exceptions they allowed, the easier it was to silence complaints. To keep the books closed. To scare off anyone who might ask questions. And now they were using that same fake authority to threaten my family. I called my lawyer. We had enough. The next day, we filed suit. Not just for discrimination, but for fraud, retaliation, and emotional distress. We submitted everything, the fake vendor records, the past cases of service dog removals, the harassment, the spray paint, the trespassing. My lawyer said it was one of the most clear-cut abuse of power cases she'd ever seen. But we knew what would happen next. They'd retaliate. And they did. 2 nights after the lawsuit was filed, Noah's bike was stolen from our porch. We found the lock snapped in half on the lawn. It was an old bike, his birthday present, but he didn't even get upset. He just nodded slowly, petted Max, and said, "They don't like us, huh?" I said nothing. What could I say? But we kept going. Our story hit the news again, this time with a headline that caught fire. HOA president accused of stealing from residents, family with service dog fights back. People were furious. Some neighbors stopped me to say they had no idea. A few offered to help. One woman left cookies on our porch with a note that said, "We're with you." Still, others stayed silent. And the board? They doubled down. They sent out a mass email to all residents claiming we were distorting facts and hurting the community's image. But the cracks had started. 2 members resigned from the board within the week. One of them, Mr. Thompson, called me in private and said I never knew about the vendor stuff. If I'd known, I wouldn't have voted. I'm sorry. We were gaining ground. But it wasn't over. The court scheduled a preliminary hearing. And the night before that hearing, Max collapsed. It happened out of nowhere. One moment, he was sitting beside Noah during a movie night. The next, he let out a low whimper and slumped over. We rushed him to the emergency vet. They said he'd been poisoned. I stared at the vet blankly, unable to process the words. His system's reacting to a neurotoxin. We've stabilized him for now, but he's not out of the woods. Noah sat in the corner, curled up in a ball, rocking back and forth. They're trying to take him away, he whispered, over and over. They're trying to take Max away. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat in that cold waiting room holding Max's leash, and I made a vow. This would end. I would burn their lies to the ground. The next morning, I walked into that courtroom not as a desperate mother, but as a woman on a mission. We presented the documents. The judge asked for clarification on the vendor payments. Our lawyer handed him a copy of the CR Solutions business registration, under Curtis Rayburn's name. Silence. And then, something I never expected. One of the remaining board members, Linda Mayer, stood up in the courtroom and said, Your Honor, I'd like to submit a statement. Everyone turned. She held up a USB drive. I have copies of internal emails between board members discussing how to remove the Johnson family without legal exposure, including instructions to make the dog disappear. The room exploded. Gasps. Shouts. A reporter sprinted out the back door. The judge called for order. Noah, sitting beside me, clutched Max's empty vest. And the judge turned to the bailiff and said, Please retrieve that drive. Then he looked straight at Curtis Rayburn. We'll reconvene in 1 hour. And Mr. Rayburn, I suggest you find legal representation. But just as the judge stood to leave the bench, Denise, the secretary, stood up from her seat in the gallery. She raised her hand. I have something to say, she said, voice trembling. And what she revealed next, it changed everything. Denise's voice cracked as she spoke, her hands visibly shaking in front of her. I didn't know it would go this far, she said. When Mr. Rayburn started those payments, he told us it was for private neighborhood patrols. He said we didn't need to ask questions, just sign off. I didn't know they were fake. I swear. The judge didn't interrupt. No one did. Denise looked around the courtroom like she was trying to convince someone, maybe herself. But after the dog incident, after I saw how the family was treated, I couldn't sleep. And when I saw the report on the news, I went back through the office computer. I found emails. Real ones. Not just between the board. With outside vendors. Things that weren't in the budget. She paused, pulled out her phone, and held it up. I copied them all. Emails about fake maintenance jobs. Unrecorded cash transactions. Even discussions about how to delay document requests from residents. It's all here. The courtroom fell into stunned silence. The judge cleared his throat and motioned for the bailiff to collect the phone and USB drive. I sat frozen. Noah whispered, Is she helping us? Max wasn't with us. He was still at the animal hospital, holding on. Yes, I said. I think she finally is. The judge ordered a recess to review the new evidence. As everyone slowly filed out of the room, I felt eyes on me, some full of pity, others admiration. But I didn't care about any of them. I only cared about Noah and Max, and finally putting an end to the madness that had stolen our peace. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded us. I gave no comment. My lawyer said we had more than enough now. Fraud, misconduct, criminal negligence. It was no longer just a civil case. This was turning into a full-blown investigation. But as we walked back to our car, Noah looked up at me and asked, Can we see Max now? We drove straight to the animal hospital. Max was awake. Weak, but awake. His tail wagged just slightly when Noah walked in, and that was enough to bring both of us to tears. Noah lay beside him on the floor, whispering that he was sorry, that he'd keep him safe next time, that we were going to make everything better. Max licked his hand and closed his eyes. We stayed there for hours. We didn't even talk much. Just sat with him together like we always had. And for the first time in weeks, the world outside the room didn't matter. But peace doesn't last long when people have something to lose. The very next morning, just before sunrise, someone threw a brick through our living room window. Attached to it was a note. Drop the case or next time it won't be the dog. I stood barefoot among the shattered glass, hands shaking. Noah hadn't woken up yet. Thank God. I didn't want him to see this. Not again. I called the police. Again. They took the note. Took some photos. Said they'd. I uploaded everything. Every document. Every piece of evidence. I wrote a post. Not just on Facebook, but on Reddit, Twitter, Nextdoor, anywhere someone might care. I attached Denise's confession. The email records. The photos of Max in the hospital. The HOA's fraudulent financial statements. And I hit publish. Within 24 hours, it went viral. People were furious. Thousands of comments. Hundreds of emails. National news stations picked it up. People from other HOAs began to come forward. Whistleblowers. Victims. Attorneys. But the most unexpected response came from someone I hadn't spoken to in almost a year, my sister. Claire had moved across the country years ago. We weren't close anymore. She'd never really understood Noah's diagnosis. Always thought I was too soft. But she called me that night. Voice low but steady. I saw the post, she said. I read all of it. I didn't know. I'm sorry. I didn't know what to say. I just sat there, holding the phone. I booked a flight, she added. I'm coming. Tomorrow. We'll fight this together. I nodded. Okay. And just like that, something in me felt lighter. The next week, everything began to move fast. Investigators from the county showed up at the HOA office with a warrant. They took the computers, hard drives, and boxes of files. Residents began gathering in front of the clubhouse, asking questions, demanding transparency. The new interim board, led by a quiet man named Gregory who had once been Rayburn's fiercest critic, reached out to me. We want to make this right, he said. But it wasn't that easy. Max still couldn't walk properly. He was recovering, but slowly. Noah had started sleeping with the light on. And we still hadn't heard the final ruling in court. Then something happened I wasn't expecting. An anonymous package arrived at our front door. No return address. Inside was a flash drive. And a note, you missed something. I plugged it into my laptop. One folder. Dozens of files. Hidden recordings. Board meetings. Secret discussions. A recording from the night they voted against Max. And one particular file that made my skin crawl. Rayburn, laughing, if we push them out, the house goes back on the market. We flip it. The board profits. Everyone wins except the sob story and her mutt. I dropped the mouse. This wasn't just about power or rules or appearances. This was planned. They were flipping homes. Forcing people out. Creating problems to cash in. And now I had proof. I picked up the phone, called my lawyer, and sent the files. That recording would be the nail in their coffin. But before we could bring it to court, something else happened. Noah collapsed in the school cafeteria. Max wasn't with him that day. He was still on vet rest. And without Max, the panic attack hit hard. By the time I got there, Noah was in the nurse's office, gasping for air, soaked in sweat. The staff had called an ambulance. He looked up at me, eyes wild with fear, and cried, "Where's Max? I can't breathe without him." That moment broke me in a way nothing else had. I realized this wasn't just about justice anymore. This was war. The paramedics strapped Noah onto a stretcher, placing an oxygen mask over his face while I held his hand and whispered, "It's okay, baby. I'm here. You're safe. Max will be there when we get home." But his body shook and his eyes darted wildly, as if even my voice couldn't reach him. At the hospital, the doctors confirmed it was a severe panic attack triggered by emotional overload. The kind of reaction that, according to his therapist, Max had been preventing for over a year. Without Max by his side, Noah's world had spun too fast. When we got back home, I sat in the car for nearly an hour, staring at our front door. There's a moment when your rage turns into something else. Something colder. Not fire, but ice. You stop yelling. You stop pleading. You start calculating. That night, I gave our lawyer the final piece of the puzzle, the recording from the flash drive. She listened with headphones in silence, then looked up and said, "We're going after everything." She filed for an emergency hearing with a request for punitive damages. And while we waited for the court date, more stories surfaced. Other homeowners in Willow Ridge. People who had been fined until they moved. Elderly residents pushed out for minor infractions. A woman whose backyard herb garden was labeled unsightly vegetation and fined $100 a day until she sold. It wasn't just corruption. It was predatory. A scheme cloaked in rules and regulations run by people who wore polite smiles and flag pins while bleeding their neighbors dry. Noah started sleeping in my bed. Max was recovering better now, walking slowly again, always within touching distance of Noah. But every little noise outside made them both jump. And every time I opened the mailbox, I did it with gloves just in case. Then came the court day. The big one. It was standing room only inside the courtroom. Reporters, neighbors, even strangers who had followed our story online. A couple wore shirts that said, "Justice for Max." The judge walked in, stern as ever. The same one from the preliminary hearing. He nodded at me, then at our lawyer. We presented everything. The documents. The payments. The fake vendor company. The audio recordings. The flash drive. Denise's full testimony. The evidence of targeted removals of vulnerable families. Then we showed the timeline of threats. The spray paint. The poisoned dog. The brick through our window. The anonymous note. Rayburn's lawyer tried to argue that we had no proof he personally ordered any of those things. But then the judge played the audio file. The room went still. In it, Rayburn's voice was crystal clear. If we keep squeezing her, she'll break. Most single moms don't have the stomach for a fight. We get the house, we bring in new buyers, flip the comps. That's how this works. There was a long silence after the recording stopped. Then the judge leaned forward and said, "Mr. Rayburn, based on the evidence submitted and the blatant manipulation of HOA authority for personal gain, this court finds sufficient cause to proceed not only with civil penalties, but to refer this case to the district attorney's office for criminal investigation." The courtroom erupted. Rayburn tried to speak, but his lawyer stopped him. He looked gray. Denise, sitting on the witness bench, looked like she might pass out. And then, just as things seemed to calm, the judge looked at me. "Ms. Johnson, do you have anything you wish to say before I issue this ruling?" I stood. My hands trembled, but my voice didn't. I never asked for special treatment. I never wanted a fight. I just wanted my son to feel safe. To have one thing in this world he could rely on when everything else got too loud. And instead, I watched grown adults punish a child for being different. I looked straight at Rayburn. "You didn't just come for me. You came for my son. And for that, I hope the law holds you accountable. But more than anything, I hope you finally understand what it feels like to lose something that keeps you whole." The judge nodded slowly, then turned back to the bench. Final judgment. The HOA is hereby ordered to pay damages to the Johnson family for emotional distress and unlawful discrimination. All liens are to be removed, all fines rescinded, and the HOA board dissolved pending further investigation. Applause broke out. It wasn't just for me. It was for every person who had ever been told they didn't belong. For every family that had been bullied into silence. For every child like Noah. But even in victory, the scars remained. That night, I sat in the living room with Noah asleep on my lap, Max at our feet. The phone rang. I almost didn't answer. It was the county sheriff. They had just arrested Curtis Rayburn on charges of wire fraud, embezzlement, and criminal conspiracy. The house flipping scheme had affected at least 8 families. And now that Denise had turned over more files, it was going to become a state-level case. But what the sheriff said next made my blood freeze. "We have reason to believe Mr. Rayburn didn't act alone. There may be others, possibly outside the HOA, who helped fund or cover up this operation, including someone close to your neighborhood security vendor. We're reopening past complaints." I hung up and looked out the window. Across the street, the porch light at Mr. Carson's house flickered on. Mr. Carson, the retired cop who used to lead the neighborhood watch. He was always quiet, always watching, and suddenly it felt like the story wasn't over. Not yet. Mr. Carson's porch light clicked off just as I pulled the curtain aside. Like he knew I was watching. Like he always had. That night, I barely slept. My phone buzzed twice around 2 a.m., unknown number, no voicemail. I didn't answer. I lay in bed with the weight of justice in one hand and a gnawing sense of unfinished business in the other. The court had ruled in our favor. Rayburn was arrested. The board dissolved. The threats should have ended. But they hadn't. The next morning, I walked outside and found a white envelope taped to my car windshield. No name. No return address. Inside, a single photo. It was Max. Taken weeks ago, before the hearing. He was in our backyard. The timestamp said 3:27 a.m. Someone had been watching us. And whoever it was, they were still out there. I called the sheriff's office immediately. They sent someone over to collect the envelope. It's intimidation, the officer said. Whoever's behind this wants to scare you into silence. But why? I asked. We already won. It's over. Maybe not for them, he said. Maybe there's more left to lose. Over the next few days, everything spiraled fast. The sheriff's department raided Rayburn's private office. They found hidden bank records, encrypted drives, and documents connecting him to 2 private buyers who had purchased multiple homes in Willow Ridge under shell companies. One of those buyers? Tied directly to Mr. Carson's family trust. They weren't just flipping homes. They were running a coordinated property laundering scheme, illegally undervaluing homes, finding families out, buying the properties through fake LLCs, and reselling them for hundreds of thousands in profit. The HOA wasn't just a cover, it was a business model. And Max, Noah, me, we were collateral damage in a long-running operation to bleed a neighborhood dry. The state attorney general launched a task force. The FBI got involved. And then something even more insane happened. Denise went missing. She was supposed to testify again, to hand over the last of the digital files. She'd left a voicemail on my phone the night before. I have more. I found something buried, something about the developer. If I don't show up, make sure they look into it. She never showed up. Police said she packed a bag, left her car in a public lot, and vanished. Some believed she ran. Others, like me, weren't so sure. The investigation cracked open the entire Willow Ridge development history. The original builder, Riverside Property Group, had connections to every board president going back 15 years. Developers had used the HOA to control resale rates. They'd inflated market values artificially by manipulating who could and couldn't stay. They wanted uniformity, clean compliance. No special needs, no problem families. No service animals. Nothing that disrupted the illusion. They sold peace and order like it was product. And behind it all was a circle of men like Rayburn and Carson, making money on fear. The day Carson was arrested, he stood on his porch in his uniform-style jacket like nothing was wrong. Neighbors watched from behind curtains as the deputies cuffed him. His face didn't even flinch. And yet he said one thing. To the cameras, to the reporters, to the world. She should have just taken the fine. A chill ran down my spine when I heard it. He meant me. The woman who broke their machine. The mom who refused to back down. The next day, our mailbox was stuffed with notes and cards. People from around the country. Teachers, veterans, single parents, other moms with kids like Noah. They called us brave. Heroes. But I didn't feel like a hero. I felt exhausted. Max was finally well again, running, playing, alert. Noah started sleeping in his room again. He laughed more. He even asked if we could get a second dog someday. A partner for Max, he said, like in superhero teams. We were healing. But we were changed. I turned down the media interviews. I let the lawyers do the talking. I focused on my family. I started working with other homeowners who'd faced HOA abuse. We started a group, HOA Watchdogs. People listened now. But Denise? She was still gone. Every few weeks, someone would claim to have seen her. In a gas station. On a train. In a diner. No one ever confirmed it. Until one morning 8 months after the final court date, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photo. It was Denise. In a tropical place. Wearing sunglasses and a sun hat. Holding a drink. Behind her, a dog. A golden retriever. The note said only one sentence. Sometimes the only way out is to disappear. I sat on the porch and laughed for the first time in what felt like years. Because maybe she was right. Maybe some battles don't end in courtrooms. Maybe some justice happens in secret, under palm trees, with borrowed names and new lives. But I didn't disappear. I stayed. I stood. And I made sure the next family who moved into Willow Ridge would never be told their service dog had to go. Because now the rules are different. Because I changed them. Because they voted to ban my son's service dog. And I took the HOA to court. And I exposed everything. If that story left you speechless, you're not alone. Drop a comment below and let me know, have you ever had a run-in with a power-hungry HOA? And if you want more gripping HOA stories, family drama, and underdog justice, smash that subscribe button and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Until next time, stay strong, stand up, and never be afraid to expose the truth.